All right, people. So as I go over this, I'm kind of hoping that it's not an endless review, that it's like the tip of your tongue, you know this, you're like wanting to shout out the, say, political, economic, and social details about the Chesapeake. And don't shout it out yet. Just kind of quiz yourself and see if you can do it, or if you just have like a cloud of confusion. And you're like, I don't even know what the Chesapeake colonies are. Because that would be a pretty big red flag if you're not sure that the Chesapeake is Virginia and Maryland. And I feel like you know their social details, since we had a giant slide just on their miserable lives. You got anything that you can fine tune about their miserable lives? Like, what's wrong with them living in the Chesapeake?
They can't get married.
Can't get married. They die. A bunch of indentured servants who are on bad land with Indian troubles. Their lives stink in the Chesapeake. This one's easy and specific, and you know it, and you want to shout it, right? The political detail of the Chesapeake.
House of Burgesses.
House of Burgesses. I know that was there for most of you. I saw it. But the Virginia House of Burgesses, and that's the easiest one ever. What's the moneymaker of the Chesapeake? Tobacco. See, we know this stuff. How about the middle colonies? Don't shout it out yet, but I feel like the middle colonies, first period, somebody like really scared me, and they were trying to describe the Chesapeake as the middle colonies. No, that would be like failure on a major grade. So you guys, it's okay now, we're still learning. Friday, if you mess up, it's a slap on the wrist, but come the major grades, if I ask you something about the middle colonies and you start talking about tobacco and indentured servants, and like you confuse the two, that would be bad.
If you call it New York, what matter for that?
Well, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, these are the middle. So just kind of think of what the middle is as like a group, and I always put something on their diversity. That's why I put New Amsterdam up there as a reminder that they're diverse. They got Dutch people, they've got Germans, they've got Swedes, they've got non-English inhabitants in the middle. So you'll see a question on the most diverse region, it is the middle. And then I feel like you can zero in on Pennsylvania a little bit. Like you know about the main group living in Pennsylvania, right? The key social detail of Pennsylvania, they're the Quakers. You know about the economy in Pennsylvania. Breadbasket. Do you know the political system? Okay, when in doubt, this is really easy. Because all 13 have this. When in doubt, if you don't have something specific like House of Burgesses, representative government. They all have a representative system. So I'm not going to give you the name of each colony's representative government, but that is a constant in all 13. The people have a voice. It's not, dictatorial. It's not a monarchy. It's not like hereditary. The people get to choose their leaders, and that makes us special, so they're not alone. So when in doubt, representative government is something that you can write. And while speaking briefly of the Quakers, that opens up the religious confusion that we might have with all these denominations that I've been dropping on you. But I've only scratched the surface, people, because remember, there are like thousands of denominations of just Protestants. But I think what you guys need to extract and remember is that they hate each other. And it's like weird to understand because, many are friendly with another now, despite our differences. Yet they go to war against each other. Like countries go to war because one is Protestant and one is Catholic. And we're talking like extreme hatred for hundreds of years. And even like if they're all Protestant, they might not like each other either. And think about it, it's all under the Christian umbrella. But a Protestant Quaker and say a Protestant Puritan, what's a Protestant Puritan do to a Quaker? They could be killed. Or they could have like a hole bored through their tongue because a Quaker simply wants to speak in church and a Puritan won't allow that. So it's weird in the sense that, look, it's all Christian. It's just different branches of Christianity. And I know this is confusing. Just look at it for a second and think like, okay, Jesus first Christians, then there's a split, then there's another split and another and another and another and another and another. And I could repeat that 10,000 times. There continues to be splits. For example, we've got a lot of Baptists in the South, But did you know the Southern Baptist is a separate denomination than the Northern Baptists? And they believe different things. They split because of slavery. Southern Baptists said, oh yeah, slavery is okay, it's in the Bible. Northern Baptists were like, no, that's a sin. So they officially split into different denominations, kind of tweaking their belief set a little bit. And this again explains it from the beginning to the split. I would understand this split as opening up a can of worms. Remember Martin Luther? Martin Luther says, oh, I can do things my own way. I can believe this way and you should follow me. But then others are like, wait a minute, if Martin Luther says I can believe this way, why can't this guy say I believe this way? And then this guy say I believe this way. And that's why you have so many different denominations. It's all, similar in the like God Jesus thing, but just different in their methods of practice. Does that make some sense to you? Just understand the conflict among them. They don't necessarily like each other. As for some other rapid fire review, you should quickly know that Catholics are not Protestants, by the way. Catholics go to Maryland. They need a safe place because Protestants don't like Catholics. So if you're still tripping up on, wait a minute, what was that Catholic colony? Think Maryland, Mary, Virgin Mary, key in the Catholic faith, Maryland, Catholics. And remember that these two are synonymous. Anglican means Church of England, and how the Puritans and the Pilgrims don't quite like them. And just, again, for reference, you may not know it at this point, but they end up living in the South. So like the far southern colonies will be Anglican / Church of England based. In the North, they're mainly going to be Puritan. So I'm just giving you a few of these details, but as a reminder, Anglican and Church of England are one and the same. Where do the Pilgrims go? Yeah, Plymouth, which becomes part of Massachusetts. And again, Pilgrims just make their page in the history book because of all of those lasting contributions. Like, yay, Squanto Thanksgiving. Ooh, Mayflower Compact. But there are so many Puritans in Massachusetts, they just absorb the Pilgrims. And you'll see that when I start to throw some numbers at you. So like Puritan Massachusetts becomes almost all of New England, as you'll soon see. So if we're again putting like names on here, Pilgrims, remember like the leader of the Pilgrims elected, William Bradford, Plymouth, and then it just becomes part of Puritans, Massachusetts Bay. Quakers, Pennsylvania. Dutch, New York, New Amsterdam. Curveball. Is there a place if you're a non-believer, if you're an atheist, you're a dissenter? It's not Maryland. It's not Pennsylvania. There is a colony for you. It's in New England. It's very, very, very small. It's Rhode Island. I'll teach you Rhode Island today, but Rhode Island makes it a point to welcome all. They make religion and government totally separate of one another, and you could be a non-believer. Jews were persecuted everywhere, but they could be welcomed into Rhode Island. So interesting stuff. If you're confused by it, it's almost like I make something for you to help you like review and sort things out. It's almost like I make a set of flashcards called Quizlet to help you out through all of this stuff. So you got Quizlet, you got objective statements, you got extra help Thursday afternoon, extra help Friday morning. I'm here to help you guys, but I got to give you some new stuff. You ready? Let's note that Massachusetts Bay, don't stress the year, by the way. Just for context, 1629 is when they're established, and they come in mass, in force, like 1,000 strong. A few little Pilgrims on the Mayflower. This is why they're going to be quickly absorbed by the super Puritans that are there, because they keep on coming and coming and coming by the tens of thousands. I learned quickly that WAP did not teach you what this is. The Great Migration. No WAP All-Stars who happen to remember this thing? There was a moment in England where they start persecuting the Puritans like crazy. Like if you're a Puritan in England, you better get out of Dodge. And it might make some sense because a Puritan wants to purify the Church of England, right? A Puritan doesn't like the Church of England. Well, who's at the top of the Church of England? the king. So you get a king who's like, oh, you don't like me? Well, bad things are going to happen to you. And as a result, Puritans leave. 70,000 are going to leave. 20,000, don't stress the numbers, just tell yourself, a lot of Puritans leave England. And they end up going to the New World, and Massachusetts Bay is their home base. Be nice to yourself in the notes, MBC, Massachusetts Bay Colony. And he becomes the Puritan leader. He's the governor of Massachusetts Bay, and he has kind of a lasting legacy, really for his quote of what he wants Massachusetts to be. I'll give you his quote in a second, but catching up, we're good. A lot of Puritans leave. A lot of Puritans are persecuted in England. He is super Puritan, governor of Massachusetts. You ready for his quote? Which I darn bet you is on Friday's quiz. It'll be like, John Winthrop wanted Massachusetts to be a blankety blank blank blank. Ready? City upon a hill. A city upon a hill. A city that all can look up to. A city upon a hill. And just kind of think about that. Perfection in the eyes of the masses, perfection in the eyes of God. A city upon a hill is what John Winthrop wants Massachusetts Bay to be. And again, just think about what that means. A city upon a hill. Everyone will look up to it because of its perfection. And again, just for reference, look, a lot will leave England. This is like a 40-year period where 214,000 will leave because of that persecution of the Puritans. And when they come to Massachusetts, this would be your typical town. And the thing that jumps out to me is that it's a town. It's a community. There are neighbors. There are homes. There's like a church and a school and maybe like a community farm. But remember how I'll have you guys compare and contrast to, say, the Chesapeake? The Chesapeake has none of this. The Chesapeake does not have a community, does not have a church, does not have a school. The Chesapeake is like big spread out plantations. But this, you're seeing a tightly knit community. And that's what you get with the Puritans. They're all kind of, in it together because they want to be that city upon a hill. Now, a few details about these guys, this is where it gets fascinating. Is there freedom in Massachusetts Bay? Like, yeah, freedom, I'm going to say what I want. I got free speech. Oh, no. You have no freedom in Massachusetts Bay. You cannot question the authority of the ministers. You do, you could be convicted, you could be executed. And again, think about the Quakers. The Quakers don't have the freedom to simply speak out in their church service. They get a rod bored through their tongue. So you don't have freedom. What if you're a woman? Do you have the freedom to be like a single, independent woman who doesn't have kids, who lives by herself on the outskirts of town? Does a woman have that level of freedom? No, what might she be if she never got married and never had kids and happens to have a lot of cats running around? She would be a witch. This is the area that prosecutes women for witchcraft. In fact, in the 1690s, hundreds of women are accused of witchcraft and 19 are hanged. So that's in Salem, in Massachusetts, in the 1690s. So do you have freedom? Oh no. And it's not necessarily a democratic system because of how, I guess, exclusive the voting club was. So again, today it's like, well, what, you gotta be 18, then you can vote? Back then, what did you have to be to vote? White, male, landowning, church member. Not just a church goer, you had to be a white, male, landowning church member. And there's a difference between church goers and church members. A Puritan church, get this, they'll have their minister preaching to the congregation, but the congregation is divided. The saved on one side, the damned on the other. The saved, they know they had some kind of intimate relationship with God and God revealed himself to those people, and then they told the entire congregation about that. Therefore, they are saved. The damned have never had that experience yet. So they hope it's coming, but if it never comes, well, then they're damned to hell, and they don't have any type of political rights. So we're talking like a very rigid religious system with these Puritans. Kind of making sense? That is their representative government. So I'm throwing the name at you. It's kind of like their House of Burgesses. But understand how, I guess, refined, how fine-tuned it was of who could participate. So yes, notable, they've got representative democracy, but it's like only for white male landowning church members. So I wouldn't call this a democracy at all. There's another name that fits the bill perfectly, kind of like a Saudi Arabia or Iran today. It's a theocracy. You heard that term? Theocracy, or a theocratic system, where the purpose of government is to enforce God's law. And yes, they will pass laws to prop up the moral code. They will pass laws to punish sin. We're talking like a theocratic system. Now the name of, yes?
On the test, is it, or like on the quiz or something, would you write theocratic system or would you write like democracy?
Depends on the question. I would say, which of the following best describes the government of Massachusetts Bay? And then I could give you like a bunch of different choices, but if you see theocracy, it's like ding, 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 that's going to be the winner. Now these are the types of laws that will enforce a moral code and punish sin. They're called blue laws. Why blue, I don't know, but I think it'll be most interesting to hear like a modern day example of a blue law. That 2023, Tomball, Texas, Harris County, Texas, we've got some still on the books. Laws to enforce a moral code. It's more preventative in nature, and you might know what this is, because you can't buy something Sunday mornings. You can't buy alcohol Sunday mornings. Why? What's the purpose? So that you show up to church sober. That's a blue law that is still on the books. Now, interestingly enough, the deadline is 10 a.m. in Harris County, but it always used to be noon. They changed it last year for like the first time ever. So I guess way back in the day, you had to wait till noon. Now you only have to wait till 10 a.m. to buy alcohol on Sundays. But hey, that's a blue law, still on the books today. Now, what were they like back then? Some people are familiar with the book, The Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter, you guys are going to have to read it. I read it in 11th grade. It's coming in the pipeline of all the wonderful stuff that you'll read. But The Scarlet Letter, the main character, Hester Prynne, committed adultery. Ooh, adultery is a big old sin, isn't it? She's punished by having to wear a scarlet A on her dress for all to see. So everyone knows that she's a sinner. And this whole shaming in public was like a common punishment for breaking one of these blue laws. Everyone knew she committed adultery, so she's like ostracized from the community. Let's say there was a younger couple that did premarital things that they shouldn't. They could be on display in like the old stock and barrel. Like together, the head and the arms, and then the entire community shames them. So shaming was a big part of it. You couldn't play cards. They make card playing illegal. What's wrong with playing cards? Cards are a tool of the devil, and it's a sin and it's a waste of time. That's kind of their logic, where cards are a tool of the devil. And you know what? You shouldn't be wasting your time playing cards. You should be reading the Bible and going to church and being pious. In fact, get this, they even banned the theater. The theater, you couldn't go to a play. Sorry for any theater people in the room, but you couldn't do that. Why? Again, it's a waste of time. If you have free time, you're reading the Bible, you're going to church. That's what these blue laws do. And I mean, I'm just opening the door of the amount of blue laws that are out there. There are many more to enforce a moral code. Interesting stuff. They work really hard though, and that might even tie to their belief set. This in full is called the Protestant work ethic. They work from sun up to sundown. They work really, 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 really hard, because you know what happens if you're not working? You're lazy. And what's laziness? Another sin. So they really do work hard. As a result, they've got a strong economy, like a prospering economy in New England. While I mention economy, I don't know, you want to put a few of the money makers for New Englanders of how they're making money? They don't have tobacco, they don't have big plantations. Do you know the main money maker in New England? Fish, specifically cod fishing. You could catch cod, salt it, sell it around the world, and they've made a ton by fishing cod. But there's also timber and shipbuilding, other elements of trade. There's whaling. I mean, there's like 10 different things I could mention, but they're really good at what they do because they work very hard. there is no separation of church and state. That, by the way, is something we have today. It's a founding principle in our Constitution, which we like our Constitution. What amendment officially separates the government and religion? Number 1. The First Amendment, gives 5 freedoms. You've got freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to petition, and the freedom to gather peacefully. Well, freedom of religion is outlined in that First Amendment, and it specifically says the government cannot mandate one religion on its people. It must officially separate church and state. Does that make some sense of what separation of church and state is? That's why, in our moment of silence, they don't make a specific prayer to Jesus or God or this or that. That would be government and religion being one, and they must be separate. That's why it's a moment of silence rather than a specific prayer. Anyway, Puritan detail, don't write this down, but that's a popular poem that was so popular they had it printed and hung in the homes of most people in Massachusetts. And it's pretty extreme type religious point of view. They cry, they roar for anguish sore, and gnaw their tongues for horror. But get away without delay, Christ pities not your cry. Depart to hell, and there you may yell and eternally roar. It's oh my goodness, that's some pretty extreme stuff. But that was so popular, they printed it, 50,000 copies, and it was in the homes, giving you a perspective, a point of view of what the Puritan lifestyle was like. You got any Puritan questions staring at this? What if you don't agree, like Roger Williams? What if you're yeah, I don't agree with this extremism here. Does he have the freedom to just speak out? No, so he leaves and he's the founder of a different colony. In fact, his founding principle in founding Rhode Island is separating government and religion. Maybe even next to Roger Williams, you got Rhode Island, but he's all about separating church and state. Rhode Island will be the first of the colonies to have pure freedom of religion. So that's kind of his claim to fame. Mr. Separation of Church and State, the founder of Rhode Island. What if you're a woman and you don't agree with things? Again, women, their role, their job is to really be married and have as many kids as possible. Their role is not to speak out in public. They need to be passive in a Puritan society, but she is not. She speaks out and basically doesn't accept the voice of the minister telling her how to pray. She's like, no, I can do this myself. I don't need a minister to preach to me. I'm going to pray to God, and God's going to communicate to me through my prayer. So that's her thing. It's kind of called antinomianism, which in a simple sense is a personal relationship with God, which doesn't sound too extreme today. I mean, people pray, people, feel it in a prayer, whatever the case may be, but she is put on trial for this. And a possible consequence of her personal relationship with God, rather than accepting the voice of the minister, is execution. I mean, this is serious, but Anne Hutchinson is unique. She's articulate. She's incredibly intelligent. And in her trial, they couldn't convict her to the death. They just decided to exile her. They decided to ban her, kick her out of Massachusetts. So whatever she did in her defense, she saved her life. Banned from Massachusetts to Rhode Island. And they say that the Puritan authorities kind of chuckled when on her way to Rhode Island, you know what happened to her? She was randomly killed by Indians. So the Puritan authorities were like, haha, see, that's God's hand. God killed her for not accepting the role of a minister. So again, it's pretty extreme stuff. Anne Hutchinson, Roger Williams, they are dissenters in Massachusetts Bay. Look at our map again, our map. We're taking mental snapshots of our map. And if you're confused of what New England is, find New York, and then everything northeast is New England. And I can clarify and simplify New England, where it's basically one big blob of Massachusetts Puritans. So that's Massachusetts, right? What's that? That's also Massachusetts. Today it's Maine, but it was like one big blob of everything Puritan Massachusetts, even Connecticut. That's basically Massachusetts Puritan overflow. Connecticut was just like Massachusetts. Now there's one weirdo in all of New England, and that's Rhode Island. They are different. They are about separating church and state. They're liberal, they're tolerant, but the rest of New England calls them a sewer. They call it Rogues Island. They call it a dumping ground because of their religious freedom. So again, remember that New England, they're all about that city upon a hill. They view these guys as a bunch of sinners. So they are liberal, they are tolerant. Anyone can vote in Rhode Island, not women though. Women don't get the right to vote for a long time in American history. For perspective, do you know when women get the right to vote? 1920. So yeah, women don't have the right to vote for a long time. 1920, that's like 100 years ago. So anyway, they are the first to separate church and state. That becomes like a official big thing of the United States when we do that everywhere. You okay on Rhode Island? I got one more slide. I still hear some crazy typing. Any questions, Rhode Island, Roger Williams, Ann Hutchinson, their religious freedom, why they're called a sewer? Again, the rest of New England doesn't like them. Now, taking them all as a whole, you got to start comparing and contrasting to other regions. And again, I've been previewing this as we go. You got great contrasting points with the Chesapeake because the Chesapeake has no families. New England is all about the family. They come over as a family. And the role of women is to have as many kids as possible. You want to know the average amount of pregnancies a Puritan woman had?
20.
10 is the average. Now, some did have 20. In fact, there's the story of one woman who had 30 kids. And it's notable because her youngest child became like a prominent mayor in New England. But can you think in like 30 pregnancies? That's like every possible year you're, childbirth, and that's, pretty extreme. Of the 10 pregnancies, they said about 7 kids survived due to infant mortality, lack of medicine, and whatnot. But yeah, they have big families. In the Chesapeake, you can't even find a bride. Hospitable climate. You don't die from the elements. And just think about that on a local level. Hey, what's the temperature going to be here tomorrow? I believe tomorrow is going to be an all-time record of 108 with a feels-like temp of like 117. Hey, could you imagine that without air conditioning? Can you think of what that would do to your water supply back in the day without like filtration? You're going to die in the south just from the elements, but in the north, you can live a whole lot longer. Like the sun is not going to kill you. Mosquitoes are not going to kill you. The water is not going to kill you. You live like well into your 60s in New England. And remember, the life expectancy in the Chesapeake is like 40. So just, again, you can live in New England. There's a sense of community. It's all about religion. Every one of those colonies is about religion with, New England, Massachusetts, super Puritans, and then Rhode Island being like the opposite of them all. And they do have a prosperous economy. That's as far as I need to get today, people. You got a bit to digest on the closing questions, and I think that once you start going through this, it's gonna be sinking in. I have some of the same review questions that I do time and time again. But knock this out. You will be able to finish by the end of class, and let's hope that it's starting to stick. I'll come around, I'll help you, but I encourage you to help each other. I think when you talk to somebody about this, it helps make it stay in your brain. Who is that William Bradford dude? Is there anyone else around you that knows who William Bradford dude is?
No. Protestant.
Pennsylvania got.
William Bradford was the leader of the Puritans or something.
Winner. And don't stress yourself out on that first question. There are a couple ways to answer it, but I think it's pretty straightforward. You're thinking, wow, they sound like they both don't like something. That might be an easy way to approach it. I'll come around, I'll help you. Let me stop my video. Maybe this video is going to go viral. Get like 1 million views.